Hello? Oh, that's loud. I'm going to back up. Thank you all very much for being here. This has been one of the most popular events of the week. It also is one that has a lot of capacity, and we've really filled it out, so thanks a lot. So this event is great because it's exactly what Nashville Design Week wants to do. We want to bring in people with great expertise from outside of Nashville to introduce them to the Nashville creative community and have all of you guys get to see what goes on outside of Nashville and have them get to see what goes on inside of Nashville. So I need to thank all the volunteers from Design Week. If any of you are here, please raise your hands. I know that you are. Don't be shy. And Design Week would not be possible without all of our sponsors, all of our volunteers, all of the people in the creative community of Nashville who help us do this. So thank you to all of you as well. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Keisha, who will introduce the program, and we'll get started. Thanks.
Thank you, Elliot. Hello, and thank you all for coming out today. My name is Keisha Miller, and I currently serve as your chapter president of AIGA. We are Nashville's AIGA, and we are proud to be a part of Music City's creative community. If you are unfamiliar with us, we are a state-recognized nonprofit organization of designers and creative professionals. Our chapter is 100% volunteer-run, and we provide programming that aims to engage our community through skill development, networking, and service opportunities. Our chapter's mission is to connect, support, and grow the Nashville design community. We are proud to be a community partner of Nashville Design Week, which is now in its second year. Now, a bit about our venue partner. The Frist Art Museum is a nonprofit art exhibition center dedicated to offering the finest visual art from local, regional, national, and international sources. They inspire people through art to look at their world in new ways and through related educational programs and community outreach activities. Check their website for more details. A special thank you to our sponsors, Anderson Design Group and MPNF Communications. Now, today's special guest is one of 24 principals of the acclaimed international design consultancy, Pentagram. He joined Pentagram as a partner in the Austin office in 2000. His work has been widely published, won countless awards, and is represented in permanent collections including Cooper Hewitt, Museum of Fine Arts Houston, Library of Congress, and many more. In 2018, he worked with the Frist on the rebrand. I would now like to introduce the incredible DJ Stout. Please give him a round of applause.
Well, I'm so excited to be back here. I was just talking to David Walker, and thank you, David, actually, I think you were responsible for maybe inviting me to come here, and Keisha, thank you very much, and to all the Design Week people, and I'm really so happy to be here again. But I was here about 5 years ago as a guest of the AIGA. Is this throwing a shadow on my face? Stefan Sagmeister told me once at a design lecture I did in South Africa, of all places. He said, DJ, I have something to tell you. Piece of advice. Never wear a cowboy hat on stage. That's what he told me. But here I am violating that. So anyway, I came here about 5 years ago, and the AIGA had invited me, Noreen Morioka, and Nicole Jasek to speak at an event. And what was interesting about it was I came up to I came into the museum, I came into this room, and this is where we did all the lecture. It was a whole, during the entire day. But at the time, 5 years ago, I really wasn't sure where I was because they didn't take me on a tour of the museum. I didn't get to see the galleries. They just sort of brought me in, and I spent most of the time in this room. Then, about 2 years ago, we were commissioned to do a new identity for the Frist. So I'm really So excited to be back here. I got here yesterday and walked down to the Country Music Hall of Fame. And on the way, I circled the building several times, took lots of photos. Because our new identity, like the sign right there, is all over the building. And the staff here, the museum has done just a wonderful job of sort of embracing the new identity and really using it in a great way, from what I can tell. Susan Edwards is here, who is the director. Susan, right there. And I'm going to talk more about the Frist at the end of my presentation. And then I'm going to invite Susan up, and we're going to chat a little bit about sort of the working on an identity project from the viewpoint of the client, the director, and the designer, and what that was all about. And I'm actually really interested to have this conversation myself, because it's been a couple years since we did that. Was it 2 years ago? Yeah. I was like thinking maybe it was even 3. But anyway, I'm so proud of how it looks on the building now. But before I talk about that, I just wanted to show you a little bit about the art of art identity from some other projects that Pentagram has done. The reason I'm in Austin is I moved to Austin in 1986. I was the art director of Texas Monthly magazine for 13 years, and then I was asked to join Pentagram in the Austin office. And I had a partner at the time, Lowell Williams, who had founded the office there. And I've been there ever since. And so my team is, I have 8 designers and I have a coordinator, office coordinator. And we do all kinds of variety of design work, including identity. But as Keisha said at the beginning, I'm one of now 24 partners internationally. We have a big office in London, an office in Berlin, office in New York, and then Austin. Makes Austin look very international. But I just wanted to comment a little bit on, we did the identity for the Museum of Modern Art several years ago. And I think it's a good example of how the best part of how an identity can really function. Because the Museum of Modern Art logo, the actual logo that spells it out, is very simple. It's upper and lowercase sans serif, but it has this very well-known acronym, Museum of Modern Art. So Pentagram got involved, and basically what we did was we stuck with the sans serif, but we came up with a system that you can sort of see here, where the logo is always sort of applied next to a piece of art. And it's just really effective. So it looks great on buses. It really works as an identity system, a set of tools, as opposed to just taking a logo and kind of slapping it on everything, which I think a lot of people think identity is a logo. And identity is way more than a logo. As a matter of fact, I always say to my clients that probably the least important part of an identity is the logo. It's how you use it and the tools that you use to brand the company. This is another one this is done for the Barnes Foundation. They built a brand new building in Philadelphia. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. Mr. Barnes, the original Mr. Barnes, loved to do these gallery settings where he had all different colorful gold frames with his collection of art, and they were always displayed salon style, which means a lot of different sized photos, all paintings and art, all on a wall together. So that's where the idea for this logo came from, these various different sized paintings, basically, like representatives of that. And so you can see how that works throughout this entire system. The New York City Ballet was Paula Scher, esteemed graphic design partner in New York, was the lead designer on this project. She had this idea that when you look out, she's very much a New Yorker, that when you look out over the city, you see all these buildings and you see layers of gray. So that's where she came up with this idea of the New York, this is what we call a logo type solution. It's a word mark. But the idea of it was that she saw in her head looking at buildings kind of going off in the distance through the smog and the pollution. So it's not that was kind of her idea. But as you can see on these signs down here below, down here, there is color to the system. So there's kind of a warm gray, there's like a greenish gray, a blue gray. But for the most part, a lot of their identity, they use the black and white. It's been very successful. We have a big office in London, which is where Pentagram started almost 50 years ago. In 2022, it's going to be our 50th anniversary. I've been a partner for 20 years. And I have a dear friend in London named Harry Pierce. And he's done a lot of really beautiful work for cultural institutions, including the Royal Academy of Arts. And so this is also a type solution. It's a combination of this big RA and then Royal Academy of Arts kind of spelled out in a Roman face, which you can see how it really comes alive on banners and on posters and whatnot. And this is another type solution to an identity. The lead person on this was Michael Beirut in the New York office. This thing is kind of, this is the Museum of Arts and Design, which is right on Columbus Circle in New York. And it's in this old building that people used to make fun of. It's like this really funky 1950s building or something, and had these big round arches and windows. So Michael and his team were inspired by that, and they created this typeface that's based on these arches. Now they put a brand new kind of a wrapper around the building, so you don't really see the arches on the outside anymore, but you see them on the inside. And so you can see how the idea here is that this typography, the MAD, changes with different patterns, and so it's all about the application. And this is one that my office did several years ago for a place that sort of it's misnamed. It's called the Dallas Arboretum. It's actually a botanical garden, and that's why we kind of explained Dallas Arboretum and botanical garden. Because an arboretum actually, if you stick to the real word, it's actually a place that's all trees. But everybody in Dallas knows it as the Dallas Arboretum. So this was an idea that I had immediately in our very first meeting. I just drew a giant D on a napkin, and I had this idea of this little vine changing with the seasons. And because their identity they had before was they had 4 logos, all that would change with the seasons. And I thought, well, let's come up with something that works with the different seasons, because a botanical garden is all about the seasons. And then we came up with this idea of hiring this really great photographer to take photographs of these flowers that they kind of use in a very minimal way. So that's a little preview of some of the other cultural institutions that we've done work for. And what I thought is that I would focus on 3 of them and kind of show you the thought process. So I think it's 11, yeah. So I'll probably talk about this for 20 or 30 minutes, and then I'll call Susan up and we'll have a little conversation. So the first one that I wanted to talk about it's close to home. So like I said, I've lived in Austin since 1986. And Austin reminds me very much of Nashville. Nashville's bigger, population-wise, but Austin's going through the same boom that you're going through. We've got just as many building cranes as you've got, and it's just crazy. Our traffic is horrible. I think you're starting to have bad traffic here. That's what I hear. So this started when a new, really great director named Louis Grachos came to Austin. And he didn't know Austin at all. He's actually a Canadian of Greek descent, but he had been in Santa Fe, and he had also been in Buffalo. And so he came to Austin, and he called me up. And it was very confusing what was going on in the art scene in Austin at the time. There was a museum that was a contemporary art museum called Art House, and this was what it looked like from the front. It was in this great building that's on Congress Avenue, the main drag in Austin. It's an old movie theater that has been refurbished, and so it had this sort of funky sign. But as you can see, the facade of the building has these, it's hard to see in this photo, but those are blocks of green glass that are all kind of sandwiched together, and they're kind of shoved into the building so that when the building at night, the light from behind it lights up those pieces of glass, so they're like this bright blue-green when you're driving down the street. Those pieces of glass go all the way through the building. The problem that existed in Austin at that time was there were two museums. There was one called Austin Museum of Art, which was supposed to be our fine art museum. And as you can tell, the logo at the time was completely ripped off from MoMA, even with a small O. I didn't do it. So that was AMOA, which is kind of a weird acronym. I think it was kind of forcing the acronym. And then there was Art House. And what had happened is Austin, even though it's a big, thriving city, has been trying to build a fine art museum forever. There's been entire pushes to build a new museum. They've raised all this money. They got a high-end architect to design a building. They've done this twice. And then we got hit with a bust, like the economy, and those projects failed. So we never have built our own fine art museum. However, the University of Texas has a really great museum. It's called the Blanton. But at the time, we had this little fine art museum that was in a kind of a temporary building downtown called AMOA. Now, Art House was the contemporary art museum. Because of the economy and everything else, they joined forces at one point. So when Louis Grachos came to Austin, the museum was referred to as AMOA Art House, which is the most awkward name ever, and nobody knew what that meant. And not only that, it's at 2 or 3 different locations. There's a location that's called Laguna Gloria, which is this beautiful old mansion that was part of this AMOA Art House property. And then there's this building I showed you called the Jones Center, which is downtown. So 2 different locations. Laguna Gloria had its own history. Just mass confusion. People in Austin didn't have any idea what was going on. Like if you just asked somebody on the street, do we have a museum? They'd be like, I don't know. And so, since I had lived there and been sort of part of the art scene since 1986, I was hired to sort of help Louis figure out a name. That was like the first thing that we did. And an identity. So after lots of discussion, the first thing we did, which we always do on every project, and we did that actually with the Frist, is we kind of look at the art that's out there, the identities that are out in the world, basically all the other contemporary logos, so that we can see how we can fit in but also distinguish ourselves and kind of stand out. As you can see, there's a lot of acronyms, like LACMA, MOCAD, there's all kinds of weird, MOCA, so people like the acronym thing. So after lots of explorations, we sort of narrowed it down to these identities, but also these names. So you can see that we're still exploring the idea of calling it Austin Art House, but we're also thinking about what do we just call it the contemporary. And you can see that there's one up there that kind of looks like a diamond or whatever. The idea there was that was a flexible logo that it would change all the time, depending on this mathematical formula. And so and a lot of these did that. They were kind of living, breathing identities. And so what we landed on was this very simple name, the Contemporary Austin, which is very clear. And that was a big part of my advice was it's a contemporary art museum. They decided not to have fine art at all. So we don't really have a fine art museum other than the Blanton, which is at the University of Texas, which is a great museum, but we don't have a city-owned museum. The idea here was very, very simple. And the thing about identities, is, particularly for a cultural institution, is and I said this a lot when we were working on the Frist, was they need to live. You got to think about this logo or this logo type. What is it going to look like in 25 years? What is it going to look like in 50 years? Like this beautiful building here was built in 1934, and it was built as a post office. This building has a certain look now since 1934. You got to think about it. You want this identity to have staying power. So a lot of times they end up being very simple. The idea here was we took the color of those glass bricks that I showed you at the Jones Center, and we matched it. And so this big part of the system is that color, that blue-green color. And we highlighted a cap A for Austin, but also for art. And that was the whole idea, after lots of explorations. So like I said, here's what the new logo looked like on the front of this building. And you can see those glass bricks and how that became a big part of the identity system. So color became like the main part of this identity system. Now my office has been working with the Contemporary now for over probably 10 years. And we're on retainer with them. But we use this color in a big, big way. We even have a name for it. It's called Danielle Blue, because the woman that I was working with at the time was named Danielle. She's not even there anymore, and it's still called Danielle Blue. It's a very simple system, but you can see sometimes we use that A as just a kind of a logo by itself. It's very simple. And then since it's multiple locations, it works where you just tag on the Contemporary Jones Center if there's an event at the Jones Center, which is that downtown location, or Laguna Gloria. And so over the years, we've done just like a whole variety of different publications where, we use the blue either as a pattern or we use it as a solid, and it's really become something that's very identifiable. We redesigned their website, which is very spare, but it uses that blue and black and lots of white space. And then we do all kinds of other publications. This is a catalog we do that's a seasonal catalog for the art school, and it has all the different art school programs in it. We still use the blue, but you can see that we have this system where we kind of use these photographs of the art materials. This is a piece we did recently, because at Laguna Gloria, where they have it's a beautiful landscaped area. It's going to be a sculpture park now. They're taking out all the invasive species, all the kind of like the weeds, and they're redoing the whole landscape. So we wanted to highlight all the wildlife in that area. It's called Laguna Gloria because it's a glorious lagoon, is where it is. There's a lot of water in Austin, by the way. So here's the cover of this little book that we did. It's like just a little, like a guide, like a birding guide. And this sculpture has become kind of an iconic landmark for this museum. And so here's a picture of that sculpture. It's huge. It's this guy kind of looking up in the air. And this is an event that they do annually called Art Dinner. I don't know if you can tell there, but those are tables that go all the way around. And it's this outdoor art dinner where they have a big auction and they sell art and raise money for the museum. So that guy, he's looking up at like that. He's become kind of the icon. We've done all the work for the art dinner. For the art dinner, we don't stick with just the blue because it's a sort of a special event. So we kind of come up with a theme for each art dinner that they have. You can see the table there. There's the DJ Stout table right there. You can see my name on there. But we do all the materials, and we help them with even the interior design of the design of the table and just every little detail. So it's really fun to work with them on this stuff. They have a thing called Camp Contemporary, which is like, they should really call it Glamp Contemporary, because it's like a glamorous camping night that you have out there at Laguna Gloria. We've done all the materials for them, and usually what we do is we work with an artist. This is an artist in Austin named Jules Buck Jones who did all these drawings of the animals for us. And then we had them like wood burned into the signs out at the event, like with a wood burning thing. Okay. Excuse me. I think I'm doing okay right here. So. And then you got to think of some questions too. So that's the other thing. I'm not just going to let you sit there. So this is the second one, and then I'll talk about the Frist. So this was an identity system that we did for the Houston Ballet. This is what their logo looked like when we got involved. Now the Houston Ballet is a really great ballet. They're like an international, really recognized ballet. And like Houston, they're in a very modern building in downtown Houston, and it's very slick, very beautiful, all-glass building. It doesn't look anything like that logo. That logo was kind of a leftover from another time, the logo type. The artistic director actually is this really great ballet director. He's originally from Australia, and they're just a fantastic group. So once again, what we did was we kind of looked at other identities for world-class ballets. And you can kind of see a lot of times they're like either acronyms or word marks. Some of them are contemporary, where they're trying to maybe look a little bit like movement, the movement of the bodies. Some are very like traditional, like the Royal Ballet and the Bolshoi. What we wanted to see, how did we look in that environment? So then I had one of those ideas that always happens to me, where I've been told that sometimes if I have this idea, that I will sell it. And Susan knows that I'm not rude, but I love this idea. This is an idea that we have to do. And I've been referred to as like that little dog that bites onto your pants and you can't get them off of there. So I had this idea we met with all these various groups. We met with the board of directors, we met with the staff, we met with the ballet dancers, and they were great actually when we met with them. They had a lot to say. And they have a real presence in social media that they do themselves. And they were like, we're all about movement. We're all about, like if you look at their Instagram feed, it's all these it's all behind the scenes where they're practicing, and it's all about movement. So I had this idea that, sort of like the Dallas Arboretum, that we needed to do an H. But I wanted it to be a typographic system, so that everything that they did involved the letter H. But what I wanted the H to do is I wanted the H to dance. It was like a typographic idea. So we did a bunch of these little animations that I'll show you here. So we did a whole bunch of these, like all based on dancers. And so this was the idea here. And then we did this, here's another version. This is more like a spinning one. Lowercase h. Okay, this scared the shit out of them. And I kept, this was one of a whole bunch of different ideas, but they were like, okay, DJ, enough of the dancing, enough of the dancing letter forms. But see, I just love the idea of somehow getting across, particularly with the new media, you can do so much with animation, because everything you look at is on your phone. You know, there's so much you could do where you could make this identity come alive, and it could be all these different versions of this dancing letter form. So I pushed for it, and they decided not to do it. But it may be one of those ideas that I bring back up again some other time. But, so we did a whole bunch of logos. And this is just some of them, actually. This was the first round, I think. It's really funny, like my partners are famous for like doing a project and they show about 3 or 4 logos. I don't work that way. I show a whole bunch of logos because I like to include the client in on the whole brainstorming, you know? So this is the first round. And you can see up there, this was one of the first things we showed, other than the dancing. There's the dancing guy over here, see? But we showed all these other ones. And some of these, like these versions right here, we animated them so they spun around. But those are supposed to be abstract H's right there. So, and this is an abstract H, and so is that. And we did animations of those spinning, and they were like, okay, enough of that, DJ, enough. Okay. So I gave up on that. And then we did this was either the second or third round, where we did sort of some variations of the H as like sort of like buildings that, you know, inspired by downtown Houston, which is big glass buildings, all kinds of things here. Some of these things were animated. And then they narrowed it down to these 4. So the very first thing I showed them was this. So that made it into the final 4. Then the one they picked was inspired by this. Once again, movement, the idea of ballet being physical movement, but also the idea of these the outfits, the tutus or whatever, that the ballet dancers wear. And so those two things inspired this version, which is a negative space H, but it gets across the thing that I really wanted, which was to get across the idea of movement. And so you can imagine like looking at that dancer from above and spinning around. And so we did an animated version of this that they use all the time now, several animated versions. We came up with a word mark that goes with it, and there's a version that's horizontal, and we came up with this kind of distinctive color. I don't know if you can see it right there, but it's kind of a bluish, purplish gray color, which was inspired by kind of the color of their building. Their glass building is kind of this purplish color. And it gives them some kind of a distinctive color. And then in all their advertising, all their materials, we kind of used some of the spokes of that logo. And they've been pretty good about using this since we went away. And there's a little animation that they kind of use at the end of their little films that they do. So that was a lot of fun and really very gratifying because I like what they've done with it since, like the contemporary, we continued to work with them for like 10 years, but on this one, we basically handed it over to them and then they took it from there. Okay, so now, I was going to tell you a little bit about the Frist project. Originally, when we got involved, this was the logo. And it's a very simple logo type. But the main thing here was that the name was the descriptor was a little confusing. And the museum knew that, and that's exactly why they called us. And I think at the time, the idea was to call it Center for the Visual Arts because it seemed a little more open and friendly, I think, and not stuffy like a museum, like the word museum. But it was confusing. And this is a very simple identity, but in our opinion, and in the museum's opinion, it was lacking a bit of personality. It was kind of like the AMOA, like the Museum of Modern Art, but it didn't really have a system that kind of brought it alive, is what I remember. So, like MoMA, it was a sans serif face, and this is kind of like what the front of the Museum of Modern Art looks like, which is fine, but really what brings it alive is how you use that system. So when we got involved, I stayed at the hotel right across the street, over here, yeah, somewhere. Yeah, that's the front of the building, okay. So I think this was a picture I took from my hotel room. And so what it had at the time, first of all, this is a beautiful building. It's just amazing. It was built as a post office, as you know, in 1930s. And it was built right here because this was Union Station where all the trains came. And at that time, mail delivery took a lot of trains. And it was a huge building because it was a huge operation. There's still a post office in this building, but it's a fraction of what it was. Because, the post office is kind of not used that much anymore. And plus you don't need all the trains and all that. So, but what was interesting is this is an Art Deco logo. This is kind of an federal style Art Deco building, so it fits in nicely. And then there was this up here which said Center for the Visual Arts. And in my opinion, I think most people driving by here just thought this was a government building. Like like what is, in a way, the Frist sounds, it looks like First. So I think some people thought maybe this is a bank, like the First National Bank. But also because you had this with no descriptor, and then you had the descriptor up here, they were sort of separated. And it just wasn't clear, I think, to most people, that this was a museum, the museum. This is like the main museum in Nashville. So there is this sort of beautiful deco face, and so the thing that we sort of latched onto was this S. There's beautiful details all throughout this building, as you know. It's just amazing. And there was a logo prior to that one I showed you that was based on one of the tiles inside that hallway that I just showed you. And it's on the back side of the building, which is actually the front of the building. It's carved into the marble there. And it was this design that was used like that, like a postage stamp. But it still had this very distinctive S, that letter S, which is sort of exaggerated there. Center for the Visual Arts. And so what we thought was, let's do something simple that can stay around for a long time, but let's try to bring that S forward to the new design because it's a part of the heritage of this place. During this process, we were involved in talking about the name, the naming. So there was some discussion early on about, first of all, can we use the word museum? There was some discussion about that this institution functions like a museum. They have fantastic exhibitions here, world-class exhibitions. But they really aren't a collecting entity, like they don't really collect art. Some people say that to be strict and use the word museum, it has to be a collecting entity, is a place where you collect art. I don't agree with that, but that's what some people thought, and so we had some discussion about that. Can we use the word museum? But the other thing that I sort of thought we should think about was maybe changing the name. Even though the Frist family is a very important donor to this museum and also a very important family name to Nashville. So, like I said before, Nashville is growing like a weed, like Austin. At the time, we figured out that there were 100 people moving here a day, which is probably more than that now. The industry has changed. Now there's lots of tech business. There's kind of a new crowd coming here, the tech crowd. I can't remember this fellow's name, but he was like a kind of up-and-coming tech guru guy. This was an artist who was actually having an exhibition here when I got involved. What's her name, Susan? What is it? Vadi Turner, yeah. She's fantastic, actually, her stuff. But what is interesting was she had grown up here. She moved away to New York, and then she came back. So I felt like the city is going through this vibrant thing. You guys even had it for a time there, like this shitty show. But that's sort of like you're on the international stage, even with a crappy show, You had, you got professional sports teams that are really a big deal. You've got these great little museums like the Hatch Show Print, which I just went to yesterday. It's fantastic. You've got world-class hotels, like this is 21C, which is also a contemporary art museum and a hotel. So we sort of talked about, well, maybe this institution should seize the name Nashville and potentially call it the Nashville Art Museum. The way that I was proposing it was that you'd have a tagline that said, "At the Frist Center." So that way you kept the Frist name in there. The Frist Center was already being used initially. And there's other entities in this building. There's the Martin ArtQuest, which is, at the Frist Center. There's a gift shop here, So the idea was to grab that name, because nobody had that name, Nashville Art Museum. And it has kind of an awkward acronym, NAM, and there was some discussion, well, it sounds like Vietnam, a little bit. But there was also, we thought about maybe the Nashville Museum of Art, but it sounded a little wordy. So anyway, there was a lot of discussion about it. We even did some comps of what would it look like on the front of the building. And then after lots of discussion and a lot of really good debate amongst everybody, the decision was made to change the name to the Frist Art Museum, which actually is a really good name because it clearly says what this place is now. But it took a lot of discussion, and so that's what it's called now. The Frist Art Museum, this was, I think, like the first round. Explorations where you can see we're starting to play with the idea of using that deco S. We did a bunch more, and we sort of landed on this color that was black, but then there's a little bit of what I think of as cadmium red, which is like Donald Judd's favorite color. So I wanted it to be sort of art-based. We did some more. And so I think a lot of times, like designers that don't do identity think that, why did they pick that logo? Just that one logo. You don't realize this is just a portion of all the different things that we look at in every identity project. And this is what we landed on, as you've seen. And then we have a horizontal version of it. We have an acronym version of it. FAM is actually a really good acronym. This is a very family-oriented place. And we chose to put it in its all black and white form on the building. These are actual photos, not fake, as you know. And I think it just looks really great up there. And I think that particularly from the Main Street or Broadway Street view, it's pretty clear that it's an art museum because it says Frist Art Museum. But also what really helps is the museum has been putting these banners up there for the different shows. And I think that is almost like even more clear that this is a museum. Because people are busy and they're driving down Broadway and they're not paying attention. And they see that, and I think it's a clear sign that this is a museum. It's on the trucks, or a truck. And they sell stuff in the store. Business cards and bags and signage. And this is a membership card. And here it is at night. And so it's something that we as Pentagram are very proud of and really, like I said, happy with the way that the staff here has embraced it and have really kind of used it going forward. So now what I'd like to do is invite Susan up. Susan Edwards is the director of the museum. And come on up, Susan. Yeah. So how are we doing on time, do you think? Okay. So I think we have a microphone.
Yep.
Hello. Okay. So anyway, I'm excited to have Susan here because I don't get to do this very often.
I do.
Where I actually, like I said, I'm kind of interested to hear from Susan about. My first question is just how has it been?
Could I hijack this just
Yeah.
slightly?
Yeah,
to
go ahead,
Take
hijack.
us back a little bit. First, I'd really like to thank all of you for being here. Keisha and David, especially David's our kind of go-to guy. And DJ, thank you. I thought it was a great presentation. And thank you all for listening. I would say the history of the logos. The first one obviously came out of a public-private partnership planning initiative to even have a resource like this in this community. And so the first logo really very much was to honor the building. The second logo came about because the first logo was almost unrecognizable. You couldn't put it on a billboard. It took up a lot of real estate on a business card. As designers, you can see how that wasn't working very well. But we'd been through 2 strategic planning initiatives and studies working with people definitely in the museum world. And the third one, we chose someone local because Nashville was changing and we had become accredited museum and we kind of knew the art world. But the most important thing was for our own community to know us. And it was there that the people who were facilitating explained to us that they didn't know what Frist Center for the Visual Arts was, and that they were interviewing people and finding out that there was one sign, and DJ affirmed this, when he was staying at Union Station Hotel and he could see the post office signage. And so we knew we really had an identity problem. But the other thing that was kind of driving me crazy was that our graphics were all over the place. And so we had every division kind of putting out something because we do 15 exhibitions a year, and there are many much larger museums in the world that don't do that much. So we're on a treadmill a lot of the time, but we really needed to grapple with this. So out of our strategic planning, we came up then with the initiatives for the next 5 years, which included rebranding and a name change. So we were kind of ready to do that. The selection of the vendor, which I think is really interesting, is that I had worked with Pentagram in New York for the Association of Art Museum Directors, which is an organization of art museum directors from all of North America, Canada, US, and Mexico. And because MoMA had used Pentagram, then when I was on the board at the time.
Who did you work with?
Well, the AAMD worked with them, so but at any rate, it was very effective, and we had a designer on staff who said, well, we don't have to work with New York, we can work with someone in Texas, and she knew DJ, and so that was really good because sometimes it's good to have someone who will galvanize the group of people, because in my mind, I was ready to go. But that doesn't mean that everyone is on board. And so Pentagram was just the right choice for us because they really got how important it was to go through the process and hear all the voices and get everyone together on the notion.
We had several meetings in here.
To begin.
At the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say the colorways also, to me, were also Bauhaus colors
Yeah.
to honor this period, sort of the late Bauhaus, to get back to gray and gold and red and black and white. So we wanted to keep everything consistent with the building, and we actually kept all the old signage. I know that our team is, I'm driving them crazy, but someone else will come in when I'm gone and say, look what they did. Let's go back and do the original. So, things change. I don't think it will last 20 or 30 years, but I don't expect to either, so it's okay with me. But
Well, I'll
we
come
can
back
pick
in
it up
30
from
years
there.
and see how it's going.
Okay,
So,
well,
but
I won't be here.
one of the things that I wanted to say about the recognition of this place as a museum was, and Susan knows the story, was when I was staying at the hotel, there's a beer place over here called the Flying Saucer. And so I was like, I'm going to go get a beer and a hamburger or whatever. And so I just got here. And so there was a woman going down in the hotel elevator with me, and she was heading over there too. We just happened to both be walking over there. And I just sort of casually said, so see that building right there? And she goes, yeah. She's the one that says First? And I said, yeah. And I said, what do you think that is? And she kind of looked at me like it was like a weird question. And she said, I'm not sure. Is it like a government building or is it a performing arts center or something like that? And so, it was just sort of a classic example of, you don't have to hit people over the head, but sometimes people are just not really paying attention because everybody's busy, and so you have to. That was a sure sign to me before we even started the project that we got to do a better job of saying what this is, because this is a fantastic institution and a real jewel for the city of Nashville. And I just thought it's a shame that people don't, that there are some people out there, particularly since the city's growing, that don't know what it is. And so that's why, to me, it's a very satisfying project, because I think we kind of raised the bar a little bit on the identity of it and describe, basically just through the identity, describing what it is.
So
Yeah.
it's been very effective. And one of the things that, from the client's perspective, is that you're so ready to go and you want to do it, you want to implement everything, but you can't always do everything that it's not hitting a light switch. It's not like go.
You can't do the dancing H.
Yeah. Although I'm inspired to move to Houston. I thought that was fantastic. But the very first thing that we did, we put up pole banners that said Frist Art Museum. And a number of years ago, we started putting up pole banners and said, well, we got to put something visual. Let's put something from the Buddha show up there. Let's put something from the Martin ArtQuest. Oh, kids are always free. We put 1 million messages out there, but not one of them said what's going to happen when you walk in the building. So I was out of town, and I came back, and I had to pick someone up at Union Station Hotel, and I drove around, and I saw those banners. I thought, holy cow, we've been advertising to ourselves for, decades. So that was step one, because construction is what it is here. It's a little harder to get our exterior signage, but we moved really quickly on solidifying graphic identity and getting everything coordinated so that we had a unified message. I will say that we don't know with great certainty that changing the message to Frist Art Museum, so you know what you're going to see when you walk in, makes a difference. But we had never had over 300,000 visitors a year in any one year. We were generally around 200,000, good year closer to 250, but in 12 months, September over September, we were over 350,000 visitors a year. And we are on target, on track, I guess a better term, to have 350,000 visitors in the calendar year 2019. But at the same time, as we have a much more direct message, we also have had Impressionism and Frida Kahlo and some really populist exhibitions. So we really need a little more time to see that. But just I go to bed sleeping much better knowing that we're consistent in our messaging and that I would say to everyone in this room, I think we all set the bar for aesthetic standards if we want Nashville to be a creative community with really high level of aesthetic beauty and everything, that design really leads that. And so I think that pleases me so much. And when I'm happy, everybody here is happy too.
I take all the credit for the increased visitors.
Thank you.
And I know there's not any clear proof of that, but I'm from Texas, so I take full credit for it. I wonder if anybody had any questions, and if not, we can continue to discuss for a little bit more. Any questions about the final name choice, or something you don't actually like about the new identity, or something that we've done before? Yeah. At the end of the project, we put together style guidelines.
For us, it was extremely smooth. I would say that. I don't know that happens in every case, but I would say that if there's, back to what I was saying before, several of us were ready for Frist Art Museum. And in fact, I was coming back from a trip and I saw a billboard that was advertising Frida Kahlo or something. I thought, in between exhibitions, you could put up Frist Art Museum downtown Nashville and it's going to work as a billboard. So there were a lot of us on board, but I think it was going through the process of being sure that everyone was on board, a very sort of Japanese methodology, so that there, a lot of founders had a lot of investment in the original look and logo and title and name and the way everything looked. But really, Pentagram really spent the time to be sure that we weren't railroading this through. And so by the time they brought in the graphics and put up the mock-ups of a coffee mug and T-shirt and everything, it was kind of ooh and ah. So, our team had to do all of the logo materials to be sure that everyone was on board for each publication. But I would say that it rolled out very smoothly because the consensus was built so that when we hit go, we were ready.
Yeah.
That's from the client's perspective.
Because there had been so much upfront work, getting consensus by everybody, we actually did a lot of applications during that process to kind of sell it and kind of show this is how it would work, So by the time we did the brand package, basically, it was a lot of stuff that had already been figured out and had already been agreed to,
And I will say the engagement of many groups, so external, internal, so from the original strategic planning initiative, there were just hundreds of people in Nashville involved in that. So it didn't come as a huge surprise. But the other thing is that we narrowed it down, although for some of us it was pretty clear, but everyone is involved in a voting process and voting and vetting, and so by the time we got there, bingo.
I don't think people understand, a lot of just people on the street, they don't sit around thinking about design all the time like we do, is just how complicated it is to get a whole bunch of people to agree to changing the look and feel of a brand. It's a really big deal. And there's these websites now, because of social media, everybody's a armchair quarterback or whatever. And there's, brand new where they just, here's the logo before and here it is after. And then everybody gets on there and they just rip it apart. And, what they always say, if it's a Pentagram project, is they always say, I would have thought better from Pentagram. That's what they always say, no matter who it is. You know, because everybody's like, I would have designed it better or whatever, but see, what you don't get in those kind of things, those blogs or whatever they are, like you don't get the idea that you have to get a whole lot of people, you have to go talk to a whole lot of people, get everybody on board, because it's really a big deal. It's like particularly changing the name and an identity. Yeah.
So, and I would say we involved our volunteers because they are, in addition to our staff, I mean, they're the face of us, and many of them had been here since before grand opening, and because architectural tours are very important to our constituency and our group identity, the identity of the organization. It's our only, well, other than the Will Ryman Roses, but it really is the only thing that's a constant here. And so that also changing that we had to change, you know, our exhibition that's from post office to art center, and you know it's affecting the history, but it's part of that. And we are about to purchase historical markers for Broadway and Des Moines. Our pedestrian traffic has changed so much in Nashville. I would say 5 years ago, we had 95% of our visitors were from Davidson County, and now we have about 35% of our visitors with this uptick that DJ created. They're coming from everywhere. We've always had all 50 states and people from all over the country, but they might be here because of Vanderbilt. But now they're walking by, and there's no doubt about it, from the banners, and it's a historical building, and in 2001, the powers that be didn't want a banner on the front of the building. Well, legally, they actually, because it's temporary, it's okay. But that's another consensus, that it took, 15, 16 years for this community to trust what was going to happen in this building, and that we weren't going to destroy the building, and that we were here for the good of the cause, and that, in fact, this is a gift to this community and to the education and after-school programs. And so we had a lot of street cred with the people who would allow us to put the banners on the front of the building. And nothing says art like art unless it's Frist Art Museum.
So I think we probably should wrap
There was
that.
one other question.
One more. I think we have time for one more question. Yeah.
It's already been answered.
Yes. Well, today, DJ,
Look
you
at-
want to answer? Danielle.
Danielle, she's totally on brand.
Yeah.
So now they're forced to always wear those colors.
Well, thank you, Terry. Great question. We used to wear a lot more gray than we do now. No, it's true. For another reason, but.
I think there was one. Yeah.
It's a little more delicate when the founders are sitting in the room. There was a lot, but, I have to say, to the everlasting credit of Tommy Frist, he said, boy, that's a great name. It says it all. And it was not Dr.
Some of the Frist family was on board.
They thought,
They
well,
liked
that's
it.
great.
Yeah.
And as someone who has to raise the money for this every year, I also think it's too soon to drop the homage to their profound generosity, because back to many of us have come here since this building was repurposed as an art center, art museum. But that was, we're very lucky to live in a community where there are people who, instead of giving their money to the Metropolitan Museum of Art or the New York Ballet, they are investing back in this community for the people who live here. The money was made here, and they want to give it back. And so I think there are a number of families, we call them the Tiff families, for those of you who are not from Nashville, the Turner, Ingrams, Frist, and they have been profoundly invested in the quality of life and the amenities in this community to make it a wonderful place to live in the 21st century. So I think the pushback was not from the family as much as from all the rest of us who
Like I said,
indebted.
it was
seriously
a long,
considered.
serious, thoughtful discussion. It didn't just come up and then disappear. It actually was, it was debated quite a bit. And, but, you know, like Susan says, I'm really happy with what we came up with.
The other thing I would say is that what made it easier for me, because my job is to get out there and get these shows. So I'm a traveling salesman, pretty high-end goods, but I'm using the Frist Art Museum for 15 years before this happened, because you can't go to London or Paris, and you know, it was kind of a mouthful. But it had defaulted to the Frist. And so we had brand recognition before we started. Yeah. So we didn't want to give that up. Because if we'd gone to Nashville Art Museum, it would have affected our brand in a negative way. Not because we don't all love Nashville, but we've already earned that. Like the Frick or the Guggenheim, they could have been New York museums, but the Whitney. Yeah.
Well, Susan, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
And thank everybody here for your attention and the great questions, and enjoy the Frist.
Thank you.
If you did not receive if you parked in the lot, make sure that you see the check-in folks for your validation for parking.